When your AI agent fails, and it does happen quite often, your first instinct is that the model is not good enough and you try to change the model. But that's not entirely true. In most cases, the model is just fine. The problem is with the data it's getting. Most enterprise agents chain together 5 or 6 live API calls just to answer one question. They burn token, they add latency, and pulling back stale or contradictory results from disconnected systems. So fault doesn't lie with the agents or models itself, because by the time the agent responds, the context is already broken and quite polluted. You need to fix that at data layer, the flow of information to the agents, and that's exactly what Airbyte is doing by fixing this by launching Airbyte Agents, a context layer that gives production agents the data that they actually need. And today we have with us once again Michel Tricot, co-founder and CEO of Airbyte, to walk us through that. Michel, you have been building data infrastructure for a long time. Where have you seen enterprises fail when they build their data pipelines for agents?
I think it's not too different, when we talk about data, about context, about everything that is about getting your data about your business and operate on it. It's not too different from what have happened in with warehouses and things like that. In order for a human to make a decision on top of data, you need to make sure that the human has access to a 360 view of what is happening in the organization into their business. And for agents, it's not that different. It's just that the way you consume data, the type of operation you're making is a little bit different and requires some new type of technology, especially when it comes to search. And that is really what has been motivating, enhancing the capabilities of Airbyte to make sure that we provide access to data to these new types of consumer that operate at a speed that a human cannot, and that is required to make decisions almost autonomously.
Thanks, Michel. Airbyte says that most failures are caused by data, not the model themselves. Can you expand on that point of failure that you have identified, which of course you are going to fix with the Airbyte agents?
As we say, data is completely fragmented across different systems. And when you let an agent autonomously discover this data, the first problem you have is the same one you have with anything data related. You have fragmented systems. You need to be able to join data across this system. I need to know that Swapnil on system A is the same Swapnil on system B. And for an agent to be able to do it without the proper infrastructure, it requires the agents to pull a lot more data to be able to make that join. So that is the first thing. The ability to join is very hard. Now, the ability to search also is very complex for an agent. If I'm searching for information about Walmart as a company, there's a lot of systems that don't have this ability to search. And an agent needs to be able to discover the context before it can take an action. That's what we call the agentic data loop, which is always you discover, you fetch the data, and then you act on that data based on the outcome your agent is trying to provide. And this is really a place where we see a lot of effort failing, and why not having the ability to centralize and to have access to that context breaks in production is that these agents spend a lot of time just pulling more data, and data that is actually irrelevant to performing the task. Meaning that, you're going to be using more token. You're going to have pollution of your context. You're also going to have a lot more latency because you need to pull this data into the agents directly. And that is really where we see a lot of things failing in production. In general, when you do a very simple demo, you can, if you want, you can even dump the data into a text file, copy and paste it, or let the agents just read the file. But that's good for a demo. That's not how agents actually operate, and that's not how you want agents to operate in production. You want them to connect to the live system and to have access to the most relevant information in a very minimal amount of time. So that to me is really where we see a lot of things breaking. So it's not really the model. I mean, yes, the models are improving, etc., but it's really this access to data. And what happens when you don't find the data also is just the model is just going to hallucinate something, because its purpose is to provide you something. And we just make it very easy for agents to have access to this information and perform action on it, and minimizing the risk of confusion of the agent.
Even if the data is good, it's clean, there is still the translation layer between the model and your system. And that's where things break down. We are seeing it right now with Anthropic Cloud 4. Prompts that used to work perfectly on previous models, they suddenly stop being followed. Your model is not following the prompt that you're giving it. It's not hallucinating. It's just not respecting the structure that you have built. And as prompts get longer, they get more complex, the confusion kind of compounds. Now, new models from OpenAI, Anthropic, Gemini, they keep coming up, and it's not feasible, it's not possible for enterprises to keep rebuilding their prompt library, their stack every time there is a new release. So how do you architect for that? How do you make sure that your system is model agnostic and resilient to change, so neither your enterprise customer nor the model providers have to worry every time a new version drops?
I would actually say it's, in today's world, companies need to adapt. Like, we are at the beginning of a big platform shift. These models needs to be monitored. The data they have access needs to be monitored. And we will need to adjust how agents are performing. Because if you just look at what agents, even in coding, were able to do a year ago versus what they were, like the breakthrough that happened in the past 6 or 7 months with coding, people had to change the way they work. They had to change some workflow. So I think here it's more a cultural thing within organization. The moment they want to adopt AI technologies, you need to be adapting to the massive changes that are happening on the market. Now, there are some things that you can already do to, in a way, give yourself some time to adapt. And, when we started to build agents, all the instructions were coming from the prompt. And we would let the agents decide when to do A, when to do B, when to do C, trying to see that I can do D because B has been successful. And that has actually led a lot of systems to just fall on their face, because you're suddenly giving the responsibility to the agent to decide based on the data that they receive, but also how it was prompted, what was the next step. Now, what we're seeing on the market and what we're seeing with our customers is that people are having more of a workflow and predictable workflow type of approach, where they try to isolate the specific places where they need to have agents, where they need to pull the data, whether it's from the context or whether it's from an API, and have predictable branches into their workflow. And that allows them to, make bringing some certainty in something that is unpredictable. But that is more like how you develop your agents. And people are moving away from the naive, I have a playbook and I just shove everything into my agent.
We have talked about context store, and I think in this context, no pun intended, that also plays a very big role. Talk a bit about context store here, what it is, and what kind of work of assembling context need to happen before the agents actually run. And if you can also talk about how does the context store work with Airbyte agents?
The context store that we're launching is really a pre-materialized, unified and permission layer for the agents to directly access live data. So what is necessary when you want an agent to get your data is, one, it has to be indexed, whether it's structured data or unstructured data. We've talked a lot about RAG and vector databases. This is just indexing of data and offering this ability for agent to search. And this is what the context store is actually doing. It is built on top of very reliable data movement primitive that Airbyte has built over the past few years. And we're adding on top of it, the ability to index that data and to make it searchable. So this is great when you have one silos, but it's also about what relationship exists between the different pieces of data. So making sure that company Walmart is connected to this list of customer, that these customers are having this type of support ticket with with Walmart, etc., etc. So the relationship here actually matters a lot because that's how the agent is actually operating. It always starts with a first piece of information, and then it's going to pull every single string it can to have the most relevant context. And that's really the primitive that the context store is bringing to these agents.
Of course, you support MCP and you have your own native SDK as well. Now, for an outsider, it looks like targeting two different audiences. One that is reaching out for MCP endpoint versus one which is reaching for SDK. How do you see this clear split in the way how teams are adopting this and the convergence where these are coming together?
So the product is the context store. And it is really this global knowledge of everything that is happening within your company. Now, companies are going through a massive change right now where they want every single team to become AI pro-efficient. And at that point, what we want to do is to make sure that the technology that we're bringing to the market is actually the same one, whether you are a RevOps person working on sales information, marketing information, or whether you are an engineer having to build an internal system for your team, and want to make sure that these teams have access to the same level of excellence when it comes to the data that their agents are processing. And so for us, it's not so much about what the audience is, whether it's a developer, whether it's a RevOps person. It's more about providing a solution for companies to actually adopt Airbyte and to make sure that every single person across the company, every single agent that is built is operating out of the same context.
If I'm not wrong, you folks are launching it with 50 connectors and you have a much bigger catalog coming in. How did you decide? What kind of feedback was there to pick these 50? And what does the entity resolution across systems like Salesforce, Index, Jira, Slack actually look like, or is actually required under the hood? How much work users have to do versus they just have to push the button and it's all up and ready?
We went for the first 50 connectors. This is where we had to identify more of what is the first problem we want to tackle. You know, when we started to talk about LLMs and everything, like the first place where people started to invest in was support. Because support, there is a lot of consumption of context. There is a lot of creating a response for your customer, et cetera, et cetera. And that was really a low-hanging fruit. And that's why, for example, we're supporting Zendesk and other support system. But the next one is really happening when on the sales and revenue generating functions. And this is a place where we like, and also those are not always the most like AI forward teams, but the moment they've tasted what AI can do for them, they are going to embrace it. And that is what the reason why like Salesforce, Gong, Marketo, HubSpot, et cetera, are very, very important. And also it's a place where these teams are relying a lot on analytics to make decisions. And making decision with analytics takes time. It takes people to build dashboard, people to build analysis, et cetera, et cetera. And our goal here is to also streamline how these teams are performing and make them more efficient. So that the only thing they focus on is just how do I get that customer to buy my product rather than everything that is around it. So that is really the reason why we went for these functions first. Now, obviously, you know, as you said, we support over 600 connectors. And for us, it's going to be about like, which are the new teams that we want to address and which teams are the one we want to help by providing that context. Now, in terms of the identity resolution, these teams have a subset of very well identified entities that they support. It's going to be customer. It's going to be contact. It's going to be opportunities. It's going to be visitors. And that is for us a way also of like providing this fast like identity resolution and linking these data sets together, because most of these systems operate out of the same entities. And for us, it is very easy to create this link. And as we go to different sets of connectors, we will add more and more entities that are linked together. But that was really the motivation there. Now, how we do it is we leverage all the pieces of information that are available in every single record that we index, and we provide the ability to just map these informations together. So if you're on Salesforce and you have your customer, I'm going to use Walmart again as an example. You have Walmart, and then on Gong, you might also have Walmart. So whether it's written the same way, whether there's a few like typo or things like that, that doesn't matter for an LLM and for like for indexing. But that's how we make this type of link, plus all the additional metadata associated to it.
Now, as much as being able to consume all the data, I think writing back, being able to write into the files, maintain your content is also equally or even more important, because agents can do a lot of things. They can actually update records, they can create tickets, and they can operate systems. But the problem that it creates is governance, privacy, and better transparency. So when you do allow write back functionality, how do you also build the governance around it so that they are only doing what they're allowed to do, because they will hallucinate no matter what?
They will hallucinate no matter what. I think we cannot expect to have a perfect system that doesn't make mistake. Even humans, when they operate with these systems, they make mistake. Now, what we have is really this ability to, when you're building agents, to enforce specific permissions. So you're not just giving access to Zendesk and every single endpoint that are available on Zendesk to write. Maybe the agents you have, because of the maturity of your adoption of AI, it might be you just want the agents to write draft. Draft has a very limited impact, and it's fine if it makes mistake. You can always have a human in the loop after that. But what is important is like really building this ability to track every single action that has been performed. Not all of them you can revert, but with the right eval, you can make sure that the agent is learning on what was good, what was not good, and have that memory of good action and bad actions. Now, in terms of system of rules, this is not something that we support today. This is something that needs to be encoded into the workflow that you're using when building agents. But for example, if you're consuming the context store directly via an MCP, the MCP has instruction to make sure that the operators of, I don't know, Claude or OpenAI is actually confirming that this is the right action to perform. For agents, it requires a little bit more work, but you can already get by with like all the permissioning and selecting which actions you want your agents to be able to perform.
Can you talk about automations, a visual interface for building agentic workflow directly inside Airbyte? It looks more like expansion of Airbyte itself from what I see. Talk a bit about where does it fit in your roadmap, who's it for, and if I may ask, what is Airbyte today? What is your vision for Airbyte?
Yeah. Airbyte is an agentic data platform. So it is really about connecting every single data system that you have and making it consumable. So the first consumers are going to be your traditional chatbot or the agent that you're writing and running on your own system. Automation is really a way of, one, for people to get very fast time to value with the data that they're replicating into the context store. It is also a way for us to just get into the this paradigm that I think every company needs to adopt, which is don't just feed a playbook to an agent. Actually build a workflow and make sure that you can iterate as models are evolving and as you're discovering things that are working and things that are not. So it's really taking an initiative to help our customers on that point on how do you start creating all these agentic workflows. Now, it's in preview, so we also want to make sure that the market, the overlap with what type of automation you can do on Claude or versus Airbyte. How does that balance? But for us, it's a very simple way for people to just get started and feel comfortable building agentic systems on top of the data that they own, and giving them a very fast time to value on the data that they own.
Now let's talk about cost, because every time your agent makes a mistake and wastes token, you have to actually waste even more tokens to fix those problems, and that becomes a vicious cycle. You are metering consumption in something you call agent operations. Talk a bit about what is that unit of measurement, and also help us understand what does that cover and how teams should actually think about cost as they scale usage.
Agent operation is really tying very closely with this agentic data loop that we talked about, which is this ability to discover. So ability to retrieve, to search for specific information on the context store is something that will be accounted as an agent operation. We only charge for the ones that are successful, that return value, etc., etc. Then you have the ability to read directly into the source system, because sometimes you need to get data that might not be in the context store. And finally, you have the ability to act, so writing data. And here again, it's every actions that you're making toward this downstream system is something that we manage, and we're adding, as the product evolves, we're going to add more and more intelligence behind to make sure that agents make fewer and fewer mistakes. So this is really what the unit that we call it, as you said, like agent operation, that's what it's measuring. So the more successful people are, the more they rely on the data that we provide, well, the more they consume on the product. Now, the piece around automation, same thing. We're going to be charging with some formula related to number of tokens that are being read and that are being written, especially because it's a data product. There will be a lot of input tokens that are going to be taken into account because we provide the data, and that's something that is reflected into the agent operation as well.
Airbyte has a very strong focus on open source. We have been covering Airbyte from day one, and we know that. Talk a bit about how does the open source community and your existing enterprise customer fit into what you're doing?
What got us to start investigating that extension of the product is because we saw a change in pattern on how people are using the open source product today, whether it's open source, whether it's cloud, whether it's our enterprise product. I would say since the beginning of Airbyte, when we first released it in 2021, every piece of data was going into a data warehouse. And what we've seen at the beginning of 2025, started a little bit in the beginning of 2024, is that people were asking us for different type of destinations. So yes, you had vector databases as an example, but you just had like people asking us to write like plain files directly into a blob storage. And when we talk to these community members or these customers about what they were doing, and say, yeah, we're using Airbyte for something else than analytics. Like Airbyte is a data movement platform. So for me, it doesn't really matter where the data is going, but I need to understand if I see a change in pattern, like what is the new use case that is being worked on by these customers. And what they were building is a new generation of data processing pipeline, where they would try to pull unstructured data, they would try to pull structured data, they will try to do their embedding on that data, feed it into a vector database, try to inject structured information into unstructured information to make sure that the retrieval with RAG architecture would work. And that to me was a very strong signal that analytics is here, it works, but there is an extension and a new type of consumer. And I want to make sure that as a data movement company, we can actually address these new emerging use cases that are coming. And yeah, that's really what got us to do it, and how it's going to be received by the open source community. I mean, in a way, a lot of them are already building AI systems on top of Airbyte. We're just adding more color and more like fully fledged features on top of it to get this product to production faster.
If you look at your customers, and I hear a lot of stories where a customer got to testing in first week of beta as compared to what would have taken them 6-7 months. Talk a bit about what was that actual blocker that Airbyte agents removed for them, which can also be a very good case study for other companies as well, as they don't have to waste months. They can just get it started as soon as possible.
I would say the first thing that saved them a lot of time was we are experts at connecting to external systems. That is really a thing where we excel at. And what they needed, they have a marketing product. And what they needed is to provide, they were basically building an agent to help their customers build campaigns, monitor campaigns, create visual assets, etc., etc. And in order to do that, they had to fetch information across Facebook, across TikTok, across HubSpot, across even like their own databases. And they actually started to build it themselves. And then they realized, okay, we are done with one integration. Now we need to do the second one. We need to do the third one. We need to do the fourth one. Plus, we also need to now interact with these APIs. And for them, it was just my whole roadmap is going to be about connecting into system. And what we did with them is basically give them, this is a very simple widget. You can provide it to your customers. They can input their credentials across all the systems that they use. And we're giving you access to all this data that is now available in the context store in just a matter of minutes. The moment the customer has inputted their credential, you wait a few minutes and the data is available. And now your agent can start operate on that, do the writes, tune the campaigns, create new campaigns. And that is something that really takes a lot of time, especially for marketing where you have potential like massive budget associated to. Like they were able to go to market in barely a week with the context store that we're providing to them.
Awesome. Now, the fact is that most enterprises already have their own vector databases. They already have their RAG pipelines. They already have set up their MCP connectors and extensions. Where does Airbyte agents sit in relation to their existing vector databases, RAG pipelines, and the whole setup they already have in place? Are you complementing them or are you replacing them?
I think that's a very good question. There is a replacement aspect to it because a RAG pipeline is great, but it rarely solves the problem of cross-systems retrieval. RAG pipeline also, people at the time thought that was the magic bullet that would make LLM a lot smarter. But what people realize is the moment they start doing something that is RAG related, they go for, let's index a sales call. So now you index a sales call. So what do you have at your disposal when you have that? You have access to potentially the title of the meeting. Better not to have that meeting called Call with Swapnil. Because at that point, I don't know who Swapnil is. I don't know what company is part of. You might not even talk about the company itself within the call. So what people had to do when they were building this pipeline is now they needed to, for every single chunk of unstructured data that they were indexing, they had to put a little bit of a header saying like, yeah, Swapnil is part of company A. This is some information about Swapnil, etc., in order to make the search relevant. And that was basically working around the fact that indexing just on unstructured data and trying to shove structured data inside of it to make the search more relevant is a massive waste of resources and energy, and it's very imperfect. Whereas with the context store, you get basically the best of both worlds, where the structured data is properly indexed, and it's actually a link for you to get to the proper structured data. And the agents, if it doesn't have the right information from that entity, it's going to look at, okay, give me the attached entity to it. And that will help the agent actually find what is the most relevant call if I'm talking to Swapnil about pricing and about this one issue that he was encountering when talking about their own customer ABC. And this is something that is very important. So RAG pipeline are good, but if you want an agent to actually be efficient, you need to have more than just chunks of unstructured data. You need to be able to attach it to real structured data that is coming from the system that you work on every single day.
Excellent, Michel. Thank you. Now, the last question before we wrap this up is that how can folks get started? We can also talk about your pricing, and do you get involved hands-on, or they just push a button, put the credit card, and they can manage it themselves, self-service?
Yeah. So, culturally at Airbyte, we have always had a very good relationship with the end user. And we've built more like the enterprise motion over the past few years. So for this one, and especially with how companies are adopting AI, is in general, it is part of the end user to figure out what can be a good solution for the problem that I have at hand. My team has been asked and tasked to identify good AI solution. I'm going to test it, and then I'm going to make a suggestion about this particular product. So for Airbyte Agent, everything has been tailored for one user to be able to get to value as fast as possible, and then promoting to more like team type of plans. And for companies that need a lot more seats or a lot more connections or type of data, they have access to a more like enterprise pricing that is built on top of all the enterprise features that we've already built within Airbyte. But the goal for us right now is to get as many end user to feel the value of Airbyte and what they get from getting the context store connected to their agents or to their chatbot.
Michel, thank you so much for joining me and sharing this insight. Thanks for sharing more information on Context Store, of course, Airbyte Agents, because this is clearly a problem that the industry is facing and they needed a solution. And now the solution is there. So folks, if you are running into the similar problem and who is not, please do check out Airbyte Agents, Context Store. And don't forget to like and subscribe this video. Michel, once again, thank you for your time, and I look forward to chat with you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Swapnil, for having me.